Hello everybody and welcome to 4-1 Work Together, where we will be preparing a chart of accounts and then also opening up a new account in our general ledger. So we'll go ahead and click on our Work Together, and again this is one of those 3-step problems, so you'll see that you have 3 different steps at the top you can click on. And let's make sure we read the directions. It says Isabel Seville owns a service business called the Seville Company, which uses the following accounts. In order to create a chart of accounts, you must first classify each account. And for each account, we want to select what type of account it is. So assets, liabilities, owner's equity, revenue, or expenses in the appropriate classification column. So this is actually a pretty good review for us from Chapter 2 of remembering what type of accounts go in which way. So you can see we have our 3 balance sheet accounts, assets, liabilities, and owner's equity, and then we have our 2 income statement accounts, which are revenue and expenses. So our first one we're going to see is accounts payable. Remember that anytime we see a payable, that means that we have a liability, so we're just going to click that. Accounts receivable, again, is when people purchase goods or services from us but don't pay us yet, so we classify that as an asset because eventually that money will come to us. Once again, we have a payable for Anoka Supplies, so a payable is a liability. And we have another accounts receivable for Greg Verez, and that is also an asset. Coming down to the next one, we have miscellaneous expense. This one's kind of easy because it does say the word expense, so we actually go over to our income statement and click on expense there. We have an insurance expense. That's also going to be an expense. And then we have prepaid insurance. Remember that we classify prepaid insurance as an asset because when we purchase insurance, we usually buy it up front, and then you're covered for a set amount of time, so we classify that as an asset. Isabel Seville, her drawing account. Remember that drawing is when a business owner withdraws money from the company to pay themselves. We classify that as an owner's equity. Next up is cash. Oops. Cash, of course, is an asset. We know that well. Sales. Don't forget that sales is actually a revenue account. A lot of people want to classify it under owner's equity. And in the beginning, we did technically do that. However, sales actually is a revenue account, as it's one of the ways that we earn revenue. Supplies is also an asset. Supplies expense, however, is an expense. We have another automobile expense. And then we have the Isabel Seville Capital. The capital account, remember, goes under owner's equity. That's where we keep track of investments and anything that has to do with our owner. And then last but not least, we have our rent expense. So I'll click under expense for that. So just a quick review of classification. You can go down and click your next step, and that'll bring us to step 2, which is assigning account numbers. So now that we've classified each account, and what they did is they actually put it into our assets, liabilities, owner's equity, revenue, and expenses. Now what we want to do is assign account numbers so that our accounts receivable, accounts payable, and expense accounts are going to be in alphabetical order by last name. And then our 3 account numbers and the numbers within a division by tens. So I'm not a huge fan of the way that MindTap laid this out, because essentially what they did is they screwed up the way it would look, so they're trying to make us think a little bit. So first things first, remember that we always classify assets in order of liquidity. So the quickest that can turn into cash is going to be the first number. So if you remember, cash is obviously the most liquid, so that account number is going to be 110. We don't actually start at 101, that's not it. As it says up in the directions, they use a 3-digit account number and they go by divisions of tens. So after cash, our next most liquid would be our accounts receivables. And again, as it noted, we do accounts receivable by alphabetical order in terms of last name. So L North is technically going to be our next account. So if we're going by divisions of 10, our next one would be 120. And then our third one would be our accounts receivable for Greg Verez. again going by tens, that's 130. And then it comes down to supplies and prepaid insurance. We technically classify supplies as more liquid because it would be easy for us to sell off supplies to get cash. It would be more difficult for us to be able to sell insurance to turn that into cash. So here we have our numbers for our asset division of our chart of accounts. Then we can go to our liabilities. Again, our liabilities are also done in order of alphabetical order. And so ANOCA comes before supply, so ANOCA will be first. So again, we're going in divisions of 10, so we start at 210, and then accounts payable for Supply Mart would be 220. Our next one is owner's equity. Owner's equity, the owner capital account always is listed first. So again, by divisions of 10, we start with 310, and then the drawing account would be 320. On the income statement side, it's actually very simple for us at this point in our accounting, I guess, careers, so to speak. We only have one form of revenue, and that's sales. So revenue, of course, will be in the 400s, and then by divisions of 10, we have 410. And then last but not least is our expenses. Expenses are always listed in alphabetical order. So expenses would obviously be 5. So we start with automobile expense, which would be 510. Then we go to insurance expense, 520. Miscellaneous is 530. Rent is 540. And supplies is 550. So yes, everybody, you do need to know your alphabet. If you need to sing the ABCs to remember to get those right, go ahead and do that. I do just want to point out, remember that the 3-digit numbering system, that first number tells us what classification it is. So again, all of the assets will be 100s, liabilities will be 200s, owner's equity 300, revenue 400, and expenses are in the 500s. Okay, last step is step 3. You can see here is our updated chart of accounts, and they put them back in the correct order for us, so you can see all of those nice and done. And then down here on the bottom it says Mrs. Seville has been classifying postage costs as a miscellaneous expense, but has found that the amount paid each month for postage has become a major expense, and she's decided to open a separate account. Postage expense. Also, a new account for utilities expense is to be added to the chart of accounts. Account number what should be assigned to postage expense. So if we look at where postage expense would fall in here, postage expense would fall between the M and the R. So when we go in between two already existing accounts, we go right in the middle. So technically, postage expense would get an account number of 535. So we drop down our menu and you'll see that 535 is an option. Then she says we also need to have a new account called utilities expense. So if we look down here, utilities would technically fall after supplies expense, and since there isn't another one on the end, that means we're going to go by a division of 10. So utilities expense would technically turn into number 560. And then as we scroll a little bit further, it says a blank general ledger account is shown here with locations identified by numbers. We want to use the numbers to answer the questions to open the cash account. So in our general ledger, what would we put under the account where it says here? That is actually the account name. So if we were opening it for cash, it would just be cash. And then the value that would go in the number 2 spot where the account number is. In case you forgot what the account number is for cash, you can head up to your chart of accounts. We of course know that it's 110 because it's the very first number that's used in our chart of accounts. And so that's it. It's just a quick classification, assigning account numbers, and then opening a new account. So you can head on over to your, on your own, and then don't forget to do your terms and questions and your application problem as well.